it's Jen Simpson. I'm going to just be talking through the steps for my lesson 6 of 10 in my unit plan for first graders on representing and interpreting data. And the big idea for lesson number 6 is that students will learn the techniques for constructing picture graphs. The lesson begins just with me introducing picture graphs from this really awesome website, ixl.com. And it's kind of hard to see, I apologize. But so I'm just going to show the class various picture graphs. We're going to kind of walk through the steps to answer the questions that are asked. So we'll just do this example one. Jessica looked at the clothes a friend was donating to the thrift shop. And as a group, we're going to look over, okay, what clothes do we see? We have belts. How many belts are there? 5. And how many pairs of shorts? 2, 4, okay. And then there are 7 jackets. So she thought it might help to know how many of each item there were. So she made a picture graph showing the donation. Which is her graph? Let's just look at the first graph, okay? And I would cover it up, the other ones. Okay, so it says how many sweatshirts, how many pictures of sweatshirts are there? The kids will say, oh, there are 7, and how many sweatshirts are in this picture? And there are 7. Okay, so that's correct. And I put a check mark. Now let's look at belts. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 belts. Does that match up? There are 5 belts. Check. And shorts. 1, 2, 3, 4 shorts. Okay, check. So that looks like this could be correct. And we're going to go ahead and pretend that it is. So mark it. And great job. Now we're going to do the same thing, and this time, for example, we're going to get it wrong. So we'll mark this one, that's wrong. And this one's actually showing a tally chart. Oh, and that's incorrect. And so if the students do get it wrong, it has a really great explanation walking through the steps. So it's a really good website if anyone needs some ideas. After I introduce in the class and I would go over the picture graph, I'm going to introduce the learning target, which says that I can get information from looking at a picture graph. And the second one is that I can use picture graphs to represent data I collect from my classmates. On the overhead, I'll display a worksheet titled Constructing and Interpreting a Vertical Picture Graph. And I'll show this worksheet in a second. As the class, we'll read through the example problems about the number of books read by students in 1 week. And I'll ask the class to look at the graph with me and answer the questions. And this is just all whole group learning. It's kind of like the focus lesson part. And then afterwards, the kids will work in groups to construct survey questions for each other. And that will kind of how the activity will fall into place. After the students and I go over the picture graph examples on the overhead, or I guess on the computer overhead, I'm going to introduce the learning target, which is I can get information from looking at a graph. That's the first one. And the second one is I can use picture graphs to represent data I collect from my classmates. And then on the overhead, I'm going to display a worksheet which the kids will get after I go over the steps with them, titled Constructing and Interpreting a Vertical Picture Graph. And as a class, we'll just read through the example problem about the number of books read in 1 week by the students in the class, by 3 students in the class, excuse me. And then I'll ask the class to look at the graph with me and we'll just answer the questions. For example, okay, what does this picture graph show? And I'm just going to ask them, what does it show? And they'll have to, decide as a group. Okay, so it looks like the number of books Hunter, Amelia, and William read in 1 week. How many books did each student read? And let's count the books. So William read 2 books. Amelia, 1 book, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books. Wow. And Hunter read 4. So who read the most books? And that, we can just look at it. We don't even have to count. We can just see that Amelia read the most books. And it's not so much about the number of books, but look at how tall it is. And then who read the fewest books? And we're gonna look, the shortest one is Hunter. Oops, excuse me. And then we're just gonna talk about how did you figure this out? And we could just say, from looking at it, we can tell. We don't even have to add the number of books, but just by looking at it, Amelia's read the most. And then Hunter read the second most, and William read the least amount. We could also add the books and say that Hunter 2, Amelia 7, and William 2, Amelia 7, Hunter 4. After this, I'm gonna explain to the class that this is what we'll be doing. And you're gonna be doing this together with your group mates, with your shoulder buddy, and then step 1, it says, okay, with your shoulder buddy, you're going to write the names of all the books you read last week. See if you can remember. If you need more space, you can always use the back of the sheet. And then, look it says number 2. You're gonna talk to 3 different people in your class, and you're gonna write their initials in the graph below. So you're gonna write their initials right at the bottom, and you're gonna draw books to represent how many books they read. So for example, and then I'll call in a student, okay, Stephen. How many books let's think, how many books did you read last week? Stephen says, I read 5. Okay, so we're gonna write Stephen's name, and we're gonna draw, how many books are we going to draw? And the students will say, 5 books. Well, how do we know 5? Because that's the number he read. So we draw 5 books, and then we'll just go through another student. And then we can compare. Okay, so we have Stephen read 5 books, and then we have Daniel, he read 9. Oh, so just looking at the graph, Daniel read more books than Stephen. And that's it. You're not going to go to the step ahead. We're going to do that later. So with their shoulder buddies, the students will complete the activity. At this time, I'm just going to be walking around assessing them. I have a clipboard. What I think works really well is to get note cards, on the clipboard, write the kid's name, the date, and just to kind of write observations. A lot of it's just also how well they work together. If one student is dominating, try to maybe talk with the other kid and get them involved and see maybe what the problems are. And this could also just be with ELL students as well. And that's why I think it's really important to kind of group kids up in in mixed ability groups. So that way, you have a stronger student working with a weaker student. After I assess the students and circulate around the room, at the end, we're going to kind of gather around. I'm just going to gather them, have them stop, and we're going to have a whole group lesson where we just go over these problems, and I have the kids share their examples. And if we have time and the kids need to, I'll have them draw the picture graph on the board. And that way they can also see the visual representation, and we can compare as a whole group who read the most books in the week. And that'd be really exciting for them. The final part is we're going to do the step ahead question. And it says, Damar reads more than Maka, but has read fewer books. How could this be? And as a class, we're just going to talk about this. And these are the kind of questions that I recall from my internship that are usually on the assessments. And these are the questions that students definitely have the most trouble with. So they're going to be working together, and then they're going to have to explain. Just because a student reads more, it doesn't mean they read more books. And sometimes it depends on page numbers, and the kids are just going to have to come up with ideas on their own. The end of the class, they're going to just be given worksheets, or just blank sheets, and they're going to have to decide on a question they want to ask 5 of their classmates. And with their shoulder buddy, they're going to have to come up with a question, for example, whose birthday's in Okay, after the group work, the students are going to pair up with their shoulder buddy, and they'll generate survey questions to ask 4 of their classmates. The survey questions shouldn't be that difficult for the kids because the previous 5 lessons they spent generating proper questions and collecting data. And so it's just kind of reinforcing learned concepts throughout the whole unit. The students will circulate around the room, asking and answering questions. At this time, the teacher will be monitoring their progress, offering assistance, again using the clipboard and the note cards to collect data. And then finally, if time permits, the representing data using a picture graph segment will come into play. Students will be provided, picture paper, markers, crayons, magazines to construct their own picture graphs. And again, they'll be working with their shoulder buddy and just scattered throughout the classroom. It should be a really fun part of the lesson. So it just reinforces their learning. They're physically constructing the picture graph on their own as opposed to just doing it on a worksheet. And if time permits, they're going to have the chance to share their data with the group. Students are invited to ask and answer, ask questions. I'll also have 4 questions on the board, which I will ask the students. And those questions are, number 1, what does this data tell us about the group survey? So the people you surveyed in your survey. What is the number of pieces of data in each category? Which category has more data and why? Which category has less? And then that will also reinforce the concepts of most, more than, less than, least. And how can this data be represented so it is clear and quickly understood? Because that's also an objective. I can quickly, read a picture graph. It's not supposed to be a laborious task. Again, I'll be assessing the students with the clipboard, asking questions just to clarify understanding, and that will be the end of this lesson. Thank you very much for watching.